Did I hear you're shopping for a car? Because I've been at it for ages. Ugh, such a time suck, right?
Not really. I bought it on Carvana. Super convenient.
Oh, then comes all the financing, research. Am I right?
Well, you can, but I got pre-qualified for a Carvana auto loan in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, but then all the number crunching and terms, right?
Nope. I saw real numbers as I shopped, found my dream car, and got it in a couple of days.
Wait, like you already have it?
Yep.
Oh.
Go to Carvana.com to finance your car the convenient way.
Okay, you can do this.
I know. Carvana makes it so convenient to sell your car. It's just hard to let go. My car and I have been through so much together.
But look, you already have a great offer from Carvana. That was fast.
Well, I know my license plate and VIN by heart, and those questions were easy.
You're almost there. Now to just accept the offer and schedule a pickup or drop-off.
How'd you do it? How are you so strong in letting go of your car?
Well, I already made up my mind, and Carvana's so easy.
Yeah, true. And sold.
Go to Carvana.com to sell your car the convenient way.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game of me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Lovely to see you. How are you?
Annoyingly cheerful, as always. Enjoying life.
Sorry, I thought there was going to be a follow-up there to enjoying life. I thought you were going to specify how you're enjoying life. Yeah, it's questions day, Kieran, on The Price of Football. Thank God this is not a football pod, Kieran, because the first question would be referees, ? Even I thought Will Hughes should have been sent off yesterday, so no wonder chill. And don't get me started on Arsenal fans. Oh my God, I'm a very angry celebrity Arsenal fan. I've been getting a series of texts from the referee performance on Saturday. Because he's a mate and he's a celebrity, very difficult to find a way of texting back, I don't give a toss. Didn't happen to my team, doesn't bother me.
Exactly.
I do agree with you. It was a strange decision, but, it didn't happen to Palace. It wasn't an Eze goal being disallowed unnecessarily at Brentford. I'm still getting over that. I haven't got time to take
You've been very, very level-headed about that to date.
Yeah, but that's what walking 5 miles a day does to you, to be perfectly honest. You just have to get through the trudging. Yeah, I've got. That's the only thing I need to focus on. We've got some great questions today, Kieran. Some really good ones. And let's start with a question from Matthew Williamson. Matthew says, I followed Scunthorpe United's fundraising efforts with great interest, and it was heartwarming to see the community pull together both in the town and the wider football family. Yes, it was, Matthew. But I do have a question, says Matthew, about raising funds to pay the wages of staff. What is there stopping an owner of a business from essentially employing volunteers and then paying them through a crowdfunder in order to avoid any tax deduction? So I like this from Matthew because it starts off as a lovely, positive, as he says, heartwarming question, and it turns into a cynical, how can we get round paying tax within the same paragraph? But it's a good question, though.
It is. I suspect there are people from many industries that have been through this thought process.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I suspect there's many people from HMRC who have been busy sharpening their pencils on the basis. Actually, you don't get pencil sharpeners anymore, do you?
You don't. Well, you must be able to get pencil. You don't get the ones you clamp to a desk, little sausage makers that you whiz around the handle. We've lost a 25-year-old.
We have, haven't we? Yes. We look at the demographics and say, why is everybody over 50? With regards to this, it comes down to whether a person is deemed to be an employee of a business or not. And if you're an employee, according to HMRC, you have something called contract for services. And a contract for services says that you are doing X, Y, and Z and that's dictated by the employer. So if I'm employed as a groundsman at a football club, say at Scunthorpe, I've got a contract to provide 35 hours a week of groundsman. This is your job description. This is what you're supposed to do. If you are self-employed, you are working on an ad hoc basis. You've got the right to refuse. You've got the right for invoice. But if I was a volunteer, would I be happy about foregoing the following rights? So you and I both do freelance work. Now, if we're sick, if you don't turn up to a gig, you don't get paid.
Yeah.
So there's no sickness pay. There's no pension.
Yeah.
From the place. You've got no holiday rights. So if you choose to work 365 days a year, you can do so. And also, if you are a volunteer, that would be deemed to be some form of income for you. So therefore, first of all, you would have a responsibility to pay tax to HMRC. So you'd have to, as opposed to the PAYE system, and the PAYE system has some merits in the sense that you just don't think about it. It's you get your net pay. I'm employed by the University of Liverpool. I get my net salary each month. That's it. I know that the tax is paid on my behalf. So it becomes your responsibility to pay the tax, and the complications that brings. You would also have to invoice the football club for your services. And what happens if they don't pay? Then, if they don't pay you at the end of the month, you've got to go and chase them. So all of these issues become a complication. There is very definitive rules and regulations with regards to what defines an employee and a person self-employed. So can you circumvent the rules? It becomes very difficult, and HMRC are likely to take a dim view because they would see it as a form of tax evasion.
I love my job, Kieran. I quite like my lifestyle, but the freelance part of it is a nightmare. There really is part of it which is I'd stayed on at the NHS. Well, a friend of mine is a comedian who thinks that as comedy is the fourth emergency service, we should all be paid by Green Flag. That would make comedians much, much happier. We wouldn't have to worry about any of the freelance stuff. We'd just be employed. We'd just invoice Green Flag every month. And they go, we haven't done many gigs. You know the rules. When the fourth emergency, let me through. I'm a comedian. If there's an emergency, we get paid, whether there's an emergency or not. David Stevens has a question, Kieran, and I'm not sure whether we've got time for you to answer it, to be perfectly honest, because it's a huge historical question. So if we could do a nutshell answer to this, I think, and then possibly make a 15-minute video that we could put up to answer it properly, that might be the best solution to this question. Because David says, is there a correlation between the exponential rise of footballer salaries and the Bosman ruling, insofar as the free movement of labour between clubs resulted in them being able to redistribute transfer fees to spend more on wages and agent fees?
This is a fascinating question, David, as far as I'm concerned. I started working on this. We're recording this on Monday morning. I started working on this on Sunday night. And I went to bed at 1:45 a.m. and I rushed into the bedroom and I said to the Baroness, you never believe this. This is absolutely fascinating. So I woke her up and she's going, what? So
you're a long way from Santorini now, aren't you?
It is a long way from Santorini now. We knew that the Bosman ruling did effectively switch the dynamics of negotiation between player and club to a certain extent. And I've got, as you know, I've got a fairly extensive collection of football club accounts and spreadsheets going back to the creation of the Premier League. Now, the Bosman ruling came into being in 1995. I've always taken the view that the increase in players' wages has been exclusively driven by the size of the broadcast deals and the success of the Premier League and exporting the product. However, thanks to David's very, very good question, I'm starting to revise that. In 1995, the average weekly wage of a Premier League footballer was £3,300 a week. And for every £100 that the football club generated, £43 went on wages. So this was pre-Bosman. You would have expected, if Bosman had no impact, you'd expect that broad relationship to have continued going forwards. But if you think about it, the Bosman ruling came into power in December 95, so therefore it could first be used in the summer of 96. And it's you got players of 3, 4, 5 year contracts, so that would roll out, the impact on players being able to take advantage of the Bosman ruling. So by the time we got to the year 2000, which was effectively sort of a 3 or 4 year rollout of Bosman to apply to all of the players, that £43 in wages for every £100 coming through the door had increased to 62. So massive. That's a massive increase, and the average wage had gone from £3,300 a week to £10,800 a week. So I've done this for all of the clubs in the Premier League, and I'm going, wow, this is absolutely fascinating, and that's why I wanted to share the excitement with the Baroness. So that is at the same time. and this is something which I always say, David has used the word correlation. And you have to be very careful. Is correlation the same as cause? And the example I always, because this is quite a common error that can be made, and certainly as somebody that enjoys playing with numbers, I grind my teeth when I see politicians and other people using correlations as excuse for causality. And let me give you an extreme example. If you take a look at the number of shark attacks in the UK and you match that to ice cream sales, what you find is that there is a correlation between shark attacks, which tend to occur in the summer months, with ice cream sales, which tend to peak in the summer months. So therefore, does it mean that ice cream sales are the driving force between shark attacks? And you would say, well, clearly that's absolute nonsense. So that is correlation. You've got two figures which increase at the same time and decrease at the same time. So therefore, does that mean that's causality? I personally don't think that is the case. I always tend to use that as an extreme example. But in the case of Bosman, and this is something I'm certainly going to spend a bit, in fact, quite a lot of time looking at it in depth. Divorce lawyers may be listening with enthusiasm. They go, is it going to work even more hours? But there certainly does appear to be a movement in the numbers pre and post Bosman on this particular basis. So fair play, David. I think you've got an intriguing one here. I think we pulled out a whopper.
A shark.
Yes.
I think if there's any doubt, Kieran, that we are middle-aged men, the fact that we are in the middle of a football finance pod talking about sharks is that's Channel 5. The next thing will, if we start talking about a documentary where could a shark beat Hitler in a fight, we know that we've given into age. Just a little tip, Kieran, take it from me. If you are going to wake the Baroness up in those circumstances, what you probably need to do first is have a couple of bottles of wine and make sure that as soon as she wakes up, you have to say, "I'm so lucky to have you." Right. And once that's been established, you can tell her what you want.
Right.
It is, as you say, a really interesting question. It's very difficult. There are two things. It's very difficult to say that without Bosman ever happening, wages would only be £20,000 a week now for Premier League players, because you imagine they would have found a way to go up anyway. But it's incredible that something that happened, as you say, it came into effect in 1996, still baffling football fans now, because still most fans, especially around this transfer window, as we've discussed, the idea that you have to, well, we've got to sell a player now. We've only got 2 years left on this contract. We've only got 3 years left on this contract. It makes no sense to most ordinary football fans, because you'd imagine, you go, well, we'll wait till his contract runs out. But that's the worst thing you can possibly do.
Yeah, because footballers are commodities. And why let a commodity taper to a zero value? So that's the attitude of clubs. And we'll talk more about the transfer window, I would imagine, on the news show on Thursday. But it's been an intriguing window, and that there has been a lot of money spent. It's just not been spent by the people that you expect to spend it.
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to use the phrase typical Palace, but hats off to Palace. We had a really brilliant transfer window and didn't register any of them in time to feature at Chelsea yesterday, which takes some doing. You bring 4 players in, we think, well, Chalobah can't play, he's on loan from Chelsea. Well, what about the other 3? Eddie Nketiah going to start? Lacroix going to start? No, not in the bench. Didn't register them in time. I was like, well, how come that? Oh, well, fair enough. Liam Reynolds has a question, Kieran, which I thought, when I first read it, was a little bit daft. Apologies, Liam. But I'm going to caveat by saying, the more I looked at it, the more I thought this was an interesting question. And it's something that's, again, if we were doing this pod in 1965, we'd have had this question. Because Liam Reynolds says, I've always been curious about attendances at football stadiums and how legitimate they are. We've all grown up stories, Kieran, with stories of the turnstile that's not linked to the actual real, the cash turnstile. Liam says, I know from a previous question on the pod that clubs count tickets sold as attendance rather than who goes through the turnstiles. Now, my question is, are security workers, media people, catering staff, etc., and even players, coaches, also counted towards that attendance? Or is it just purely tickets sold or comped? The reason I've decided it was an interesting question, because there are probably 1,000 people. A Premier League game, you'll by the time you've counted security, catering, media, that's probably an extra 1,000 people in the stadium. So if you wanted to count those, Kieran, that would be quite handy, wouldn't it?
Depending upon your objectives, yes, it is. I absolutely agree with Liam that I refer to it as the pretendance, because the officially announced figure is the basis of tickets sold. And I was at Brighton versus Manchester United a week ago, and there were loads of empty seats because clubs have made it increasingly difficult for people to acknowledge that life gets in the way. And sometimes people are on holiday, I've not had a chance to organise getting my tickets as somebody else, and you have to go through so many hoops that I find lots of people just throwing up their hands and saying, sod it, I won't attend, and the seat goes empty. So there is a significant difference between the official attendances. And I absolutely agree with you that historically, if we go back to when we were a wee bit younger, clubs had an incentive to understate the attendance because it was a cash industry and cash was very useful. You and I are both aware of various tales involving executives and managers and so on in terms of how cash was distributed at the clubs. That has switched because we now have these cost control rules within football. Clubs now have an incentive to overstate numbers because that's going to help them from a PSR point of view. But when it comes to staff, an attendance is people who have bought tickets. It's people who are paying for the privilege of being at that match, as opposed to stewards, security staff, ground staff, and so on. So those people do take up a significant number. And if you take a look at the accounts of some clubs, they actually separate out full-time employees and numbers of part-time staff on a match day. And as you say, it can easily reach four figures for the clubs with the biggest stadia. So it is just purely tickets which have been sold by the club that goes into the official attendance. And if you've given some to a school, and you see these projections, then they would be added in as well, because they might say we've been helping out local schools, and look, as a result, the attendance is up by 500.
Interesting you say that about schools, Kieran. With a friend of mine was talking about Carabao Cup attendances midweek, and I include my own club in this. We're watching the highlights of so many of the games and so many of the grounds. There were exceptions, Everton, for example, but so many of the bigger grounds half empty. There's, Selhurst Park, there was the Norwich fans in one part of the half-weight stand, the rest of it was sectioned off. And it's like, fill that with kids, sell those tickets for £1, give them away to kids and give them a scarf at the same time. Don't have it empty. It just takes a bit of effort. And in terms of the long-term support of the club, it just makes much more sense to fill those empty seats with people that would be only too excited, too pleased to have a free ticket. They can't afford one normally. It's just very short-sighted thinking, I thought of that, Kieran. Now, our next question, Kieran, comes from Nick Dart, who is a Southend fan, so I'm assuming he's from Essex. I don't know whether it's because he's from Essex. The fact he's called Nick Dart cheered me up so much. It could be called Nick Hooker Duck or Nick Go-Karts. Somehow, I don't know why I would associate Essex and Southend with fun fairs and fun, but I do. And I'm going to ask this question, Kieran, because it is something we have talked about, but I think it's worth revisiting because I think the answer should be yes, they should. But anyway, Nick says, long-suffering supporter of Southend United, but extremely pleased that our ownership problems with Ron Martin have been resolved. However, I'd like to ask the fit and proper person due diligence checks, etc., whatever you call them, are these checks only performed by the leagues on new owners when ownership of a club changes hands, or are they performed annually? Because owner situations can obviously change over time, and I wonder if a regular ongoing check is in place. And we've discussed this before, Kieran, as I say, and I think there should be a regular ongoing check. I think the fit and proper persons test should be reviewed every year for every club and every owner.
There is a case for that, but remember, the Premier League, the EFL and the National League are members' clubs. And members aren't going to vote for increased scrutiny with regards to their behaviour, their circumstances and so on, which has therefore allowed some owners who have been miscreants following the acquisition of a club. So unfortunately, from your perspective, Nick, that will not be the case. However, If we take a look at the potential legislation which is going to pass through Parliament, and I think it's starting off in the House of Lords, which is an unusual approach to take, there will be a licensing system as far as clubs are concerned. And whilst that won't directly be the equivalent of the owners and directors test, clubs will have to put forward evidence that they have the means and the wherewithal to continue trading for the foreseeable future, if the legislation goes into fruition. And therefore, it can be used as an example where if you don't satisfy the terms and conditions of the license, what are the potential consequences? And one of those potential consequences is that the owner might be unable to continue to act as owner. That is not, however, a solution to the problem, because who's going to pay the wages? If the club is losing money, and let's face it, there's an 80 to 90% chance that any club is losing money at any one point in time, how is that going to be addressed? So I think the legislation potentially is going to nudge things in a more positive direction with regards to transparency and scrutiny of owners, but it's not going to be a solve-all.
Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Try Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost, built for WordPress creators by WordPress experts. With 100% uptime, incredible load times, and 24/7 WordPress priority support, your site will be lightning fast with global reach. And with Bluehost Cloud, your sites can handle surges in traffic no matter how big. Plus, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. Get started now at bluehost.com.
Well, we got a minute. I'm going to buy that truck I've been wanting.
Wait, don't you need like weeks to shop for a car?
I don't. Carvana makes it super convenient to find exactly what I want.
Hold up. You're buying a car on your phone? Isn't that more of a laptop thing?
You can shop wherever you want.
I like to do my research, read reviews, compare models. Plus, Carvana has thousands of options. How'd you decide on that truck?
Because I like it.
Oh, that is a great reason.
Go to Carvana.com to sell your car the convenient way.
Our next question, Kieran, comes from Tony Kokinos. And I'd like to congratulate you, Tony, if you're listening to this. I hope you are. Because Tony has sent in a question which is also a plug for his book, which I think I admire the chutzpah there, Kieran. But Tony Kokinos has this question. And Tony Kokinos introduced himself as the author of Caviar and Sausages, Arsenal in the Time of Wenger. Do you know what, people? I don't think Wenger really gets the credit now in retrospect that he should do. I mean, that unbeaten season was remarkable. They had some cracking players, didn't they? But back in 2002, says Tony, Arsenal fans were told that we had to have a new, open brackets, tacky, close brackets, crest, as Arsenal's iconic 1990s one could not be copyrighted. Recently, though, Arsenal started to use the old one on some of their retro training gear that they're selling. So why can't they reintroduce the old classic crest or a modern version of it? It's more of a legal question than a financial question, Kieran. But, of course, there are financial implications because they'll be charging quite a lot of money for that retro training gear.
They will be. The thing is, Arsenal can use the retro crest, as can anybody else. And I think that's part of the problem. If you take a look at the issues surrounding the crest, what Arsenal have said is that because the original crest evolved over a period of time and contained multiple elements, and it was difficult to trace down who'd contributed towards those multiple elements, they were not in a position to copyright it. And that's why they had the introduction of the new crest. If you go to the Arsenal website, they have trademarked the word Arsenal, the word Gunners, the Arsenal shield, which is effectively the crest. They've even trademarked Gunnosaurus, which given that they made redundant the person that used to be Gunnosaurus, just shows the double standards we expect from clubs these days. Retro kits are very popular. There are companies which specialise in the production of retro kits, and I'm sure you've got many of the iconic Palace kits going back over time. I think the most common manufacturer of them is a company called Score Draw, and it's great. If you're a Chelsea fan, remember they used to have that grey Commodore one, which was it was as you can dislike Chelsea but still like the kit and vice versa.
Yeah.
So that they are very popular. But what you will see is the kit looks perfect, except it's not got the Umbro badge, or it's not got the Nike bit.
Okay.
And whilst I think I'm probably in the 99% of people that loathed it, what Nike did with the Liverpool tick, I don't know if you saw the match yesterday, but they
The vertical.
they got people talking about it.
Yeah.
And it looked awful.
Yeah.
But they will say they've got people
Yeah.
talking about it. So a very clever piece of marketing. And it does also mean that the Liverpool away shirts that Uncle Terry has been selling, like Uncle Terry, they got the tick right. He's ahead of the game. His suppliers clearly have got contacts who've got contacts.
Well, also, Kieran, that becomes that's the kit they beat Man United 3-0. So there's going to be people going, I'll pay £100 for that from Uncle Terry to be the one in the pub who's wearing that.
Do it for cash discount.
Yeah,
of course,
£20.
20 quid. Yeah. So that's the position, and I think I can understand Tony's frustration, and there are many fans of many clubs who don't like the way that crests have gone. I mean, one of the first things that the Glazer family did when they acquired was Manchester United. It might have been before, but it used to be called Manchester United Football Club, and then it became Manchester United. And I know it's really annoying. And as somebody that's familiar with the city of Manchester, it has been simplified, but it can now go on a range of products, and the club benefits from that intellectual property.
I was really interested watching the highlights of the Newcastle Spurs game last night to see how many Newcastle fans, I mean, that black and white kit is, of course, iconic, but you see how many Newcastle fans choose to wear the red and blue hooped away kit, the one that Jean Lowe used to wear, and which intrigues me. But just quickly on that copyright issue, Kieran, on Palace's away kit now, we've got a new crest, which is the old crest, but without the Crystal Palace. So it's an eagle, slightly designed. And to be honest, it looks a little more like Tottenham's badge, which most Palace fans don't like it. Presumably, they would have copyrighted that new image as well as the copyright they already hold on the old image.
Certainly, because otherwise you will have people who'll be in a stronger position to sell hooky versions. Because if you say, well, it doesn't say Crystal Palace on it, it just happens to be an eagle. So Palace have to protect. And given that Arsenal will have copyrighted or trademarked Gunnosaurus logo, in effect, Palace will have done the same. They've got to protect the intellectual property areas of the club.
It's still one of the most tragically funny things I've ever seen. I can't remember why, but there was a minute silence before an Arsenal game, and I'm sure Sky did it deliberately, but they panned across the Arsenal team looking solemn and sombre, and in the middle of them was Gunnosaurus with his little head bowed. It's just like, make him stand at the back, for the love of God. Our last two questions, Kieran, both involve your club, and in different ways they are really, really interesting questions, I think. The first comes from Pravat Nistala. And Pravat says there have been many articles written about Brighton that reference a secret algorithm used for their scouting, and that has been the basis of their success in the transfer market. But who actually owns the intellectual property rights to this secret source? If it is the Brighton club, then do other teams owned by Tony Bloom, like Union Saint-Gilloise, I'm not sure they are anymore, but do they license the algorithm from Brighton as well? And can other clubs do the same? If it's owned by Bloom or one of his non-football companies, then if someone was to buy his stake at Brighton, would the IP rights be transferred as well? It's a really interesting question, Kieran, because the media love a discussion about Brighton's transfer policy, don't they, and how much money they seem to make out of their scouting and player recruitment. So to discover that there might be a secret sauce at the bottom of it, Kieran, which I presume will have a hint of quinoa and maybe a bit of lime, I don't know. But is there a secret sauce that you're using down on the South Coast?
Tony Bloom is an immensely private individual. So
right, okay.
What exactly goes on is uncertain. However, there is a company called Star Lizard Consulting. And Tony Bloom, when he used to spend a lot more time as a professional poker player, and he was very successful at that, was known as the Lizard.
Okay.
He was set up this company. But if you take a look at Star Lizard Consulting now, his name's not on the list of directors or anything. But if you go into the back pages of Brighton's accounts and have a ferret around, you find reference to Star Lizard Consulting and what Brighton are doing. Brighton are paying this company, Star Lizard, £3 million a year for something. Now, we don't know what that something is, but one would imagine it would be effective, the provision of access to the data which is used by Star Lizard. If you then take a look at the accounts of Star Lizard Consulting itself, I've got to be honest, they're pretty nondescript. Turnover's about £35 million a year, makes a little bit of profit. Average wage for an employee is about 60 grand. So, clearly for a consultancy, that's not particularly high, not particularly low. What happens at Star Lizard, nobody is quite certain. It says it sells software and it does consultancy work. But I've just been reading the book by Ian Graham, and I think he's coming on the show in a few weeks, and it's all about data analysts work. And what he said, and I think this is something which I would absolutely echo, everybody's got the data. There are so many organisations now scrutinising every match. A lot of it can be done remotely. A lot of it's farmed out overseas, and then it's brought back to the UK for further. So you've got millions and millions of pieces of individual data points now arising in respect of every football match. And I think the Palace coach, doesn't he, at half-time? He says, these are 3 issues which I've picked up. And again, that is data analysis. So, the fact that it's shown in video form is actually based on the data. The analysts were picking it up. There's a hell of a difference between data and analysis, because analysis is understanding the data. Just throwing numbers at people is meaningless. And what I suspect Star Lizard Consulting are doing, and what Tony Bloom's business is supposed to be, and again, it's all shrouded in mystery, is that he offers advice on how to beat the bookies, how to get an edge.
Yeah.
And that is through the data analytics. And as a result of that, Brighton have been able to take advantage of all of the data which is being utilised by Star Lizard, and they will have used that along with the fact that they've got traditional scouting as well, and they've got a no dickheads policy and so on. So as far as Pravat's question is concerned, I don't think it's a secret source, but because everybody else has got the data, but I think they've got the people who understand the data. They tend to be sort of PhD students who are galacticos in terms of their mathematical prowess. I can add up. That's all I can do. And I'm good at adding up numbers. These kids are operating in a quantum physics level of understanding data.
Your last point there about very clever students crunching the numbers. I read a really interesting piece about Tony Bloom recently. I thought of you at many occasions during it. And he hadn't taken part in this piece, obviously, as you said, he's very private. But they were talking to people who knew him because, as you alluded to there, he made his first fortune by looking at gambling markets, in particular overseas and in Southeast Asia, and finding sporting events where he thought one of the contestants was underpriced, if you like, where the bookies had got it wrong. And the person doing this interview asked an associate of his, said, he just sees patterns. Is he one of those people that are so clever he just sees patterns? He said, no, he sits down, for 36 hours at a time and analyses the data. It's not some odd TV Forrest Gump type character who just looks at a piece of paper and it all comes back at him. It's actually very hard work, but he knows what he's looking for.
Yeah, I've met him once, and my opinion of myself is that I'm street smart, and I work with people at the university who are super smart.
Yeah.
But I survive because being street smart has benefits, in terms of, I think I've got good communication skills and so on. And that's useful because I'm a teacher. And I will be in the presence of people and I go, you are 2 or 3 tiers cleverer than I am, but I don't actually really understand what you're saying. I met Tony Bloom once and I was just listening to him for 5 minutes and I realised he's 3 or 4 tiers above any of the colleagues that I work with, just an absolute genius. But also he does have that ability to put it across in a very understandable manner. So I'm not saying this because I'm a Brighton fan. He is the cleverest person I've met in my life.
Wow, really?
Yeah, in terms of just being 3 or 4 steps ahead. And that's partly due to the fact that, why is he so private? He's a poker player. He's actually, don't give anything away.
Yeah.
Because that gives you an edge in poker. And you're absolutely right. He got his edge as far as gambling was concerned, because he went into the Asian markets, and in the Asian market, let's say that Southampton are playing away to Liverpool or Manchester City. In the Asian markets, Southampton would start with 2.5 goals. And he realised that he could actually monetize that. And as you say, he saw weaknesses as far as the markets was concerned, and has been a success on the back of that, along with many other businesses, none of us know what they are.
Our last question, Kieran, as I say, also involves your club. To be honest, I'm more interested in the answer to this question than I am to Pravat's question. Although Pravat, it was a fantastic question, and I really enjoyed listening to the answer. But this question comes from Andrew Ward, and I've had a written affidavit in place to make sure he's not related to Peter Ward, because, of course, I wouldn't have asked the question. Again, for our 25-year-olds, look it up. But Andrew Ward says, this is not strictly a football finance question. Oh, it is, but it's about so much more than that. But I'm interested, says Andrew, to know the returns Kieran has had over the last number of years through his emotional hedging. As Brighton's form has got better through the years, to Kevin's dismay, I would assume Kieran's emotional hedge fund returns are more in the red than the black these days. And we should explain, Kieran, to people who are maybe going, what, emotional hedging? He's already woken his wife up at the start of this. Now what's he doing? This is Kieran putting money on his team to lose, as knowing full well they will probably win, but as a little consolation prize, putting money on his team to lose. So that's a good point, Kieran. Where are you in the spreadsheet these days?
I did go through quite a bad patch under sort of the first half of last season. And for people that don't understand, my view is if I think Brighton are going to win a match, I'll back them to lose. And sometimes I'll do vice versa. So what I do is I look at the odds and I say, right, I'm not a big gambler, but I would normally place those bets within an hour before the match kicking off, because I'll have seen the side, say, right, I know, right, I can just say such and such a player's injured. And so, I took went through a bit of a rough patch, but none of my Brighton fans, mates, are going to talk to me for months now. When the injuries were starting to rack up and it got to Christmas, I put on quite a large bet on Crystal Palace to finish above Brighton last season.
Oh, my God.
I think at the time,
oh my God.
Yeah. And I didn't want it to happen, but I got very good odds. So that sort of turned me back into the black again.
Very good. I would have given you 500 to 1 at that time. So when you say, it's hard to say when you say it wasn't going very well, that means Brighton were winning. So it was going very well.
Brighton were winning. Yeah. So the whole point about hedging is to take away the big highs and the big lows. Right. We've lost, but I've just made so much money. So I got the end of last season was the ultimate emotional hedge.
I'm quite annoyed we finished above you now. You've harshed my buzz, Kieran, as I used to say in the Jimi Hendrix times. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution as well, that'd be very kind of you, and it'll get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes. And you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter, X, and find us on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to buy our book, which is coming out imminently in paperback, in fact, we should have cheesy photographs of ourselves this week holding one, then you can find details on our website, pricefootball.com. We'll be back on Thursday with our news pod. We've got quite a lot of news to get through. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell and a plug for a gig. Kieran.
Yes. So we are appearing at the Cheerful Earful Podcast Comedy Festival, which is taking place in Clapham. I think the pub involved is at Balham. And that is on Thursday, the 17th of October. Tickets, you go to the Cheerful Earful website, or I think there's a link now on the Price of Football. It would be great to see you. We'll be chatting before and after, no doubt. So it would be great to see people. And it's a chance to ask us questions and not have to wait 5 months for an answer, which can, surely is worth the price of a ticket by itself.
Yeah, and it's a chance to ask us questions and not have the answers filtered through the legal process.
Yes.
Perhaps we should now move on, Kieran, to plugging the pod rather than the gig that's we're both going to get arrested at.
Yes, true. So thanks for all your support for the show. Really appreciate it. And the level of interaction is quite humbling at times, and also putting us right when we get things wrong. Putting me right when I get things wrong, let's be honest. There's various ways of supporting the show. Thank you to everybody on Patreon. If you want an advert-free version of the show, that's the route to go down. There's another way that you can support the show, and that's to give us a review using your app. Won't take you very long. Write whatever you want. It doesn't make a blind bit of difference, apparently, according to Producer Guide. It's the fact that people are doing reviews that matters. So you could even say you would rather have the show presented by possibly my all-time spitting image favourite character, John Gielgud, and Larry the Cat from number 10 Downing Street, and it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference.
Oh, that'd be... Oh, Larry purring and John Gielgud. Well, purring, what a lovely voice he had. I'm also chuckling because I know the context in which Kieran threw in the word John Gielgud there. It's not just you. It's not just you. It's not just you that gets put right, Kieran. I casually mentioned last week that the Banana Cabaret, or the Bedford rather, where we're performing Cheerful Earful, has no stage. And I got several tweets from people going, well, it has got a stage now, actually, the last 6 months. So, yeah, it hasn't got a stage. It's got some beer crates. That's what it's got. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.
At Nutrafol, we don't just help your hair, we help your body grow it. Because it's never just about your hair. It can be your job, or your deodorant, or your lunch, or just normal life. That's why our whole body approach targets the key root causes of hair thinning. Discover your root causes and why we're the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand at Nutrafol.com. That's Nutrafol.com. These statements have not been approved by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease paid for by Nutraceutical Wellness, Inc.